The most feared billionaire in the city was having dinner alone, until a poor little girl walked into the restaurant and said, "Please, marry my mom. She's all I have left. You won't believe what happened next." The light rain fell onto the cobbled sidewalk as the city's most expensive restaurant shone under golden signs. Luxury cars pulled up at the door. Bodyguards adjusted their jackets, and waiters rushed by with crystal glasses. Inside, the tables were filled with businessmen, politicians, and millionaires, all laughing loudly, toasting contracts and promises. It was a place where only the powerful had a voice, where $100 bills were treated like napkins. But no one expected that tonight a single sentence would silence everything. Welcome, I'm Marcos Paulo, the storyteller. Subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from. There he was, Oliver Montclair, the eccentric and feared billionaire, sitting alone, casually flipping through the menu as if each dish was insignificant compared to what he already owned. He was known for buying companies, destroying reputations, and rebuilding empires in mere days. No one dared approach without an invitation. Rumor had it he was so wealthy he could buy an entire city just to play at being mayor. He was the kind of man who made rooms go silent with his presence and fear with his words. Soft background music played as voices murmured throughout the restaurant when a little girl, dressed in worn-out clothes, suddenly appeared in the luxurious dining room. Her dress was faded, her shoes old, her eyes wide, scanning the chandeliers and shiny cutlery. She looked fragile, misplaced, but determined. Everyone turned to look. Some laughed, others whispered, "Security! Who let her in? A beggar?" But she didn't hesitate. She walked straight toward the most untouchable man in the room. Oliver glanced up for a moment, curious. He was used to sycophants, journalists, and opportunists. But this was different. The girl stopped beside his table, staring at him without fear, her big eyes shining with unshed tears. The entire restaurant went silent, as if the world itself held its breath. She clutched a small, crumpled envelope in her hands. "Please." Her voice broke through the air, trembling, almost a whisper, but strong enough for everyone to hear. Oliver frowned slightly. The security guards approached, but he raised his hand, stopping them. The girl took a deep breath, her small chest rising and falling with contained desperation. Everyone waited for the next words. "Please," she repeated, eyes locked on his, her words carrying a kind of courage far too big for her tiny body. "Please, marry my mom. She's all I have left." The sentence exploded in the air like unexpected thunder, silencing the laughter, freezing the silverware mid-air, wiping the smug smiles off faces. Oliver's eyes, cold as marble, narrowed. For a moment, no one breathed. The entire restaurant became an audience to that absurd request. A child asking for marriage to a billionaire out of pity, desperation, or something no one could yet understand. Questions spread like wildfire. Whispers rippled through the room. "Is this a joke? Does anyone know this kid? Where's the manager?" muttered the rich guests. But Oliver said nothing. He studied the girl the way one studies a complicated contract, trying to decipher the fine print behind such a bold request. The silence turned into tension. Some guests discreetly pulled out their phones, recording the scene. Waiters exchanged nervous glances. Security was ready to intervene. But the billionaire remained perfectly still. The whole world seemed to move in slow motion, awaiting his reaction. And instead of laughing or having her thrown out, Oliver did something no one expected. He pointed to the chair in front of him and with a grave, curious tone said, "Sit, tell me, why?" And that's when it all began. Oliver Montclair. That was the name that made presidents nervous and businessmen whisper. Heir to a massive empire of technology and mining, he had turned an already obscene family fortune into something monstrous. At 42, he was on every billionaire list, the cover of business magazines, and the subject of countless conspiracy theories. But behind the tailored suits and public appearances, there was a cold, solitary, deeply skeptical man. It was said he believed in nothing but numbers. He was known for his ruthless intelligence and his refusal to show emotion in public. Oliver trusted no one, had no real friends, and despised sentimentality. He had grown up in elite boarding schools, surrounded by spoiled heirs and indifferent teachers. Affection had always been replaced by contracts, and childhood by suffocating expectations. The word family meant inheritance and duty, never love or warmth. At 25, he took over the family conglomerate after the sudden death of his parents in a helicopter crash, or, as some whispered, something far less accidental. Since then, he had amassed power, multiplied profits, and shut his heart off from the world. Relationships, superficial, friends, opportunists, trust, non-existent. He believed everyone had a price, and no one did anything without wanting something in return. Yet, behind his calculating stare, there was a silent void. Oliver carried an invisible scar, the emotional abandonment of childhood and the weight of never having known true love. Even with mansions, yachts, and endless bank accounts, something was missing. At night, when the spotlight faded, the silence of his loneliness was deafening. That was the price of standing at the top. No one to trust, no one to love. He didn't need anyone, or at least that's what he told himself every morning in front of the mirror. The reflection showed a perfect face, but the eyes hid the cracks of a weary soul. No wonder he rejected marriage, avoided emotional bonds, and ran from promises. To him, marriage was a contract, love was a weakness, and compassion a trap. Despite his coldness, one thing earned him respect: his discipline and brutal sense of justice. Oliver could be harsh, but he was incorruptible, at least when it came to merit. He valued competence, recognized intelligence, and despised hypocrisy. Many hated him, few admired him, but no one ignored him. He was an unavoidable storm in the business world. What few knew was that for months now, Oliver had been carrying a growing restlessness, a subtle discomfort, like something was about to happen, something beyond his control. He felt the routine lose its flavor, contracts seemed empty, numbers no longer filled the hollow in his chest. He was tired, though he'd never admit it. That night, he was at the restaurant just to enjoy dinner in peace. No journalists, no flatterers, no gold-digging socialites proposing fake marriages, and he certainly didn't expect to be approached by a poorly dressed little girl in the most exclusive restaurant in the city. But fate, cruel and ironic, doesn't follow human logic. What Oliver didn't know was that night, that innocent sentence from a stranger's child would be the first real crack in his wall of ice. And perhaps the beginning of something he never believed he deserved, a different life. The girl sat on the chair in front of Oliver, her little legs swinging, unable to reach the floor. Her eyes trembled with a mix of fear and hope as the crumpled envelope remained tightly clutched in her small hands. Oliver stared at her in silence, his expression unreadable, but something behind his gaze had begun to crack. Neither of them noticed when the maitre d' approached, followed by security. "Mr. Montclair, would you like us to remove the child?" the maitre d' asked politely, though discomfort leaked through his tone. Oliver raised his hand again, signaling them to back off, but the looks of disapproval were already spreading across the dining room. Whispered judgments filled the space. "Unacceptable," some muttered. "This isn't the place for beggars," sneered others, and the phone cameras kept recording. Social pressure hung heavy in the air. Wealthy clients wrinkled their noses in disgust at the girl's presence. Socialite wives whispered in indignation. To them, that poorly dressed, misplaced little girl was a stain on the restaurant's luxury. But Oliver's eyes remained fixed on her, curious, skeptical, intrigued. He wanted to understand. "Why would you ask me for something so absurd?" he questioned, his voice low but charged with intensity. The girl took a shaky breath, her eyes glossy with tears. She opened the envelope and pulled out a worn photograph, a visibly exhausted but beautiful woman with delicate features and a sad smile. "Because she's my mom, and she's dying," the girl whispered. Before Oliver could react, another figure approached, a tall man dressed in a dark suit who'd been watching from the back of the restaurant for several minutes. It was Richard Belmont, Oliver's business rival, known for his arrogance and for humiliating anyone who dared cross his path. He clapped his hands slowly, wearing a mocking smile. "This is priceless," Richard sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "The mighty Oliver Montclair, being blackmailed by a street kid. Are you going to get on your knees now, Oliver? Or would you rather pay to make this embarrassment go away?" Discreet laughter rippled through the room. The public humiliation was set. The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she held her chin high. Oliver felt the tension build. He hated being cornered, especially in public. But there was something different about this situation. It wasn't just pride at stake. There was real desperation in that child's eyes. Richard's security guards moved closer, ready to escalate the scene. For a moment, Oliver considered simply walking away, avoiding the scandal. But the girl's words echoed in his mind. "She's all I have." And for the first time in a long time, he felt something close to anger. Not at the child, but at the situation itself. Something wasn't right. The entire restaurant held its breath, waiting. Richard smiled, certain he had won another ego war. But Oliver Montclair wasn't known for running from challenges. And that night, without knowing it, would mark the beginning of the greatest challenge of his life. Richard Belmont wasted no time. With slow steps and that poisonous smile, he approached Oliver's table. The wealthy guests nearby watched the scene unfold like an exclusive show, savoring the humiliation of someone they usually feared. "You always hide behind that stone-cold face, Montclair, but tonight even that won't save you," Richard sneered, adjusting his tie with disdain. He then crouched beside the little girl, talking to her as if she were some stray animal. "Listen, sweetheart, your mom won't get anything here. That man," he pointed at Oliver, "has no heart, only money. And with money you can buy anything, except dignity." Discreet laughter echoed around the restaurant. The humiliation was complete. The girl clutched the envelope against her chest, her face turning red with shame, but she didn't cry. Still, her eyes shone with sadness and indignation. She looked at Oliver, waiting for something, but he remained still, his face unreadable, his expression confirming the rumors. A man made of ice. Richard straightened his posture, delivering the final blow. "You know what's funny? I bet your mom is just another gold digger trying to squeeze money out of Montclair. Get in line, sweetheart. The world is full of people like her." The collective laughter rose again. The restaurant became a cruel courtroom where the powerful crushed the helpless for entertainment. Oliver felt his blood boil, though his face didn't flinch. Inside, something disturbed him. That scene, the exposed girl, the rich people laughing, her desperate stare, transported him back to old memories. Boarding school days when, despite his wealth, he was humiliated by the other heirs as the troubled orphan, the Montclair kid who lost everything. The pain was different, but the feeling was exactly the same. The little girl bit her lip, holding back the tears. It was clear how hard she tried not to fall apart in front of them. She wasn't there for pride or ambition. She was there out of pure desperation, out of love. And Oliver, with all his cold exterior, recognized that look. The look of someone who has almost nothing left. Still, he didn't get up. He didn't defend her. Not yet. And that hurt her more than Richard's words ever could, because in that instant she realized maybe all adults were the same. Cold, distant, unreachable. And the entire restaurant seemed determined to confirm that cruel rule. The maitre d' returned, nervous but determined. "Mr. Montclair, perhaps it's better to remove her to avoid further discomfort." His words sounded polite, but the meaning was crystal clear. "Throw the little beggar out before she stains the Persian carpet with her misery." Oliver remained silent for long seconds, analyzing the scene. The humiliation was complete, but deep inside the girl's eyes, there was still a spark, and that he couldn't ignore. The silence lingered for uncomfortable seconds. Oliver remained still, eyes fixed on the girl, as if weighing something far beyond words. Richard was already walking away, satisfied with the spectacle, while the maitre d' stood by, waiting for permission to end the scene. But then Oliver spoke, quietly, firmly, with no emotion. But his words cut through the air like a blade. "What's your mother's name?" The girl hesitated, surprised. The question was simple, yet it carried a subtle promise. A faint spark of possibility, a sudden shift in the humiliation. She clutched the envelope tighter to her chest and answered, her voice trembling but determined, "Amelia Clark." The name floated in the air, and for the first time, Oliver registered it with genuine interest. "Amelia Clark," he repeated, as if mentally recording the name. He pulled his phone from his jacket pocket, typing with precise, practiced fingers, then placed the device to his ear. The restaurant fell silent, curious eyes following every move. Meanwhile, the maitre d' quietly stepped back, sensing the direction of the situation had changed. On the other end of the line, Oliver's personal assistant answered, "I want a full report on Amelia Clark in 30 minutes. Address, medical records, everything," he ordered without hesitation. He hung up before waiting for confirmation. His eyes returned to the girl. "You said she's dying?" he asked, his tone now filled with cold, practical curiosity. The girl nodded, tears filling her eyes but refusing to fall. "She's in the hospital, and they said without a transplant, she won't." Her voice broke, but the seed was planted. Oliver couldn't just ignore it now. Around them, guests slowly returned to their meals, though their eyes stayed locked on the scene. Richard, realizing he had lost control of the situation, made a dismissive gesture and walked away for good. Yet, the damage was done, and so was something new. Something that neither Richard nor Oliver himself could stop. Oliver took a deep breath. On one hand, logic told him to end this, walk away, forget it. But something about this disturbed him. It wasn't pity, it was discomfort. A quiet, nagging reminder that, behind all the numbers, there was still a man. A man who once knew what it felt like to be completely alone. He glanced at the girl one last time before saying, "Take me to her." It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a yes, but it was a beginning, a small step that, without him realizing, would change everything. Half an hour later, Oliver's black car pulled up in front of a public hospital on the city's outskirts. It was a place he never imagined setting foot in. Narrow hallways, peeling walls, the heavy scent of disinfectant mixed with exhaustion and suffering. He walked beside the little girl, who led the way with quick steps and wide, cautious eyes. For the first time in years, Oliver felt out of place. Money meant nothing here. The eyes of patients and nurses followed him with curiosity and unease. Designer clothes, a luxury watch, that unmistakable presence. He looked like a foreigner in that world of pain and urgency, but Oliver paid no attention. His mind was focused on the reason that had brought him there. The girl's mother, Amelia Clark. The woman who, unknowingly, was already tangled in his fate. They reached room 212. The door was half open. Inside, Amelia lay in bed, pale, her delicate features marked by exhaustion, her eyes barely open from weakness. Yet there was undeniable beauty in her, and a quiet dignity that resisted the hardship. Oliver recognized it instantly. This woman had been through hell, and still stood. The little girl approached the bed, gently holding her mother's hand. "Mom, I brought him," she whispered. Amelia opened her eyes slowly. When she saw Oliver, surprise mixed with discomfort. She tried to sit up, but lacked the strength. "I'm sorry. She shouldn't have bothered you," Amelia whispered, her voice frail but proud. Oliver raised his hand, asking for silence. "I'm not here out of obligation. I'm here because something tells me I should be." The words sounded strange even to him. He wasn't one to get involved, wasn't one to act on impulse. But something about this situation stirred him, and he hated to admit it. In the following days, Oliver arranged for private doctors, paid for tests, and brought in specialists to assess Amelia's condition. His team questioned the orders, but he was unshakable. For the first time, he was using his power and influence For something that had no direct profit, it was uncomfortable, it was new, but he wasn't backing down. Meanwhile, he got to know the girl, Emily. Her name was Emily. She was only 8, yet carried the maturity of someone forced to grow up too fast. Fatherless, raised by a sick mother, she had grown up surrounded by unpaid bills and hospital corridors, and still her eyes sparkled, her stubbornness admirable. Emily wasn't begging, she was fighting. Oliver also learned more about Amelia. Despite her struggles, she had been a teacher, dreamed of giving her daughter a better life, and refused hollow charity. There was dignity in that woman, and silently, it dismantled him more than any business negotiation ever had. With time, the hospital became part of Oliver's routine. Between board meetings and contracts, he returned to that simple room, listening to stories, following her treatment. The man who trusted only in numbers was slowly allowing himself to trust in something far more dangerous: people. Everything seemed to be on track. The best doctors were monitoring Amelia, her treatment was progressing, and for the first time, Emily smiled with real hope. Oliver, though he wouldn't admit it, was growing attached to that little family. It was strange, uncomfortable, but inevitable, until the blow came, unexpected and cruel. That Monday morning, as Oliver arrived at the hospital, a nervous nurse approached him. "Mr. Montclair, I need to speak with you." Her tone wasn't ordinary. Something was wrong. She led him to the hospital's administration office. On the desk, an envelope with documents and an eviction notice for Amelia's hospital bed. "She can't stay here anymore," the hospital director explained, avoiding Oliver's eyes. "We received orders from above. Political pressure. We can't keep patients without formal coverage. And there's been interference." His voice trembled. Oliver didn't need much to understand exactly what was happening. Richard Belmont. It could only be him. The rival couldn't stand losing in any arena, even outside the business world. With some quick investigation, Oliver confirmed it. Richard was using his influence to sabotage Amelia's treatment. He bribed officials, pressured the hospital board, threatened to cut funding. It was a cowardly, indirect attack, but effective. Rage burned through Oliver's veins like fire. This wasn't just an ego battle anymore. Now, lives were at risk. Emily, the girl who had dared to look him in the eye and ask for the impossible. Amelia, the woman who even sick carried herself with dignity. They were paying the price for a war between powerful men. That night, Oliver sat alone in his glass-covered penthouse, staring at the city below. For the first time in years, he felt powerless. Money could buy almost anything, but it didn't guarantee immediate justice. Worse, he knew that if he retaliated with violence or acted illegally, Richard would use it against him. The fear of losing, the wounded pride, the bitter memories of childhood humiliation, it all mixed inside him. For a fleeting moment, Oliver considered walking away. Maybe it was better to step back, avoid the scandal, let the world go on as usual. But then, the image of Emily clutching the crumpled envelope returned to his mind. The fragility, the courage, the impossible request. The next morning, standing in front of the mirror, Oliver made a decision. He wouldn't walk away. He wouldn't run. For the first time, he would fight. Not for contracts, not for shareholders. He would fight for people, for something he once believed no longer existed inside him. Humanity. That same night, while Oliver reviewed documents alone in his office, his phone rang. It wasn't a familiar number, which was already unusual. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. On the other end of the line, a deep, hoarse voice introduced itself. "Mr. Montclair, I believe we have a common enemy." Oliver frowned, suspicious. "Who are you?" he asked bluntly. The voice continued, calm, with no rush. "It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is what I know. Richard Belmont. He won't stop, and if you keep fighting alone, you'll lose. But I can help you." It was intriguing, dangerous, and extremely tempting. Cautious but curious, Oliver arranged to meet the man in an underground parking garage, far from the eyes of the press. The next night, he was there, waiting. A man emerged from the shadows, wearing a dark suit, his face partially hidden by a hood. He handed Oliver a thick envelope without saying a word. Inside, evidence, documents, records, and something even more valuable, personal secrets. Richard Belmont had skeletons in his closet, many, and that mysterious man had just placed them all in Oliver's hands. Corruption, bribery, forged documents, including direct involvement in sabotaging Amelia's treatment. It was the kind of material that could destroy reputations or save lives. Oliver analyzed every sheet with surgical precision. This wasn't just about revenge. Now he had a real tool to flip the game. But along with the envelope was a handwritten note. This only works if you have the guts to get your hands dirty. It was a cruel reminder that in the world of the powerful, no one plays clean. As he processed everything, Oliver realized something else. The mysterious man knew too much. Was he someone from Richard's inner circle, a betrayed ex-ally, or simply another player in this chess game? At that moment, the doubt was secondary. What mattered was that, finally, Oliver had a real chance to protect Emily and Amelia. In the following days, Oliver acted with precision. He gathered lawyers, discreet journalists, and strategic contacts. He laid the groundwork for a public and legal takedown of Richard. He knew the risks, knew it would expose him and his company. But for the first time, that seemed worth it. Between secret meetings and careful strategies, Oliver kept returning to the hospital. Emily, though unaware of everything, could sense that things were changing. Amelia, still weak, began to smile more often. Hope, once so distant, was now taking shape. But the real confrontation was yet to come. The grand ballroom of the luxury hotel was packed. Cameras, journalists, businessmen, everyone was waiting for the announcement of a major merger between two conglomerates, Richard Belmont's and an international group. It would be Richard's final masterstroke to consolidate his power and, as a bonus, publicly humiliate Oliver Montclair, who had been purposely excluded from the deal. But what Richard didn't know was that tonight things would not go according to plan. Oliver entered the ballroom with steady steps, wearing an impeccable suit and the look of someone who had already decided how this would end. Around him, whispers rippled through the crowd like wildfire. "He's here! What's he doing here? This is going to be a problem," they murmured. Richard, on stage, masked his discomfort, but for a brief second his smile faltered. Without asking permission, Oliver climbed onto the stage, interrupting the ceremony. The room fell into absolute silence. Richard tried to take control. "Montclair, if you came here to embarrass yourself, be my guest." But Oliver didn't flinch. He pulled from his jacket a thick envelope, the same one the mysterious man had given him, and held it up for the cameras to see. "Ladies and gentlemen," Oliver began, his voice controlled but sharp as a blade, "before you celebrate this deal, perhaps you'd like to know the true character of the man about to sign those billion-dollar contracts." He opened the envelope and revealed the evidence: documents, illegal transactions, direct links between Richard and the sabotage at the hospital, fraud, and bribery. The hotel's giant screen projected the documents in real time. The audience gasped in shock. Journalists scrambled to take notes. Cameras zoomed in on every detail. Richard turned pale. He tried to smile, tried to argue, but the evidence was undeniable. His mask slipped. The arrogant, untouchable man was now completely exposed. Oliver didn't stop. He kept revealing with surgical precision every detail of the scheme, including Amelia Clark's case and the manipulation of the healthcare system to harm an innocent woman. "This," Oliver said, pointing to the screen, "is not just corruption. It's attempted murder by proxy. And now, you all know it." Richard tried to defend himself, but the reporters' questions and the disgusted stares from the business elite overwhelmed him. His partners distanced themselves. Investors withdrew their proposals. Within minutes, his empire of arrogance began to crumble, and Oliver stood firm, expressionless as always. But for the first time, there was something else in his eyes: justice. Security escorted Richard off the stage under boos and protests. Oliver calmly descended, ignoring the flash of cameras that followed him. He knew this victory wasn't just corporate, it was personal. It was the first real step in protecting Emily and Amelia, and in a way, making peace with his own past. Outside the hotel, his car was waiting. Sitting in the back seat, Oliver took a deep breath. There was still much to be done, but for the first time he felt like he wasn't just fighting for himself, and that changed everything. 2 days later, Oliver was walking down the hospital corridors with firm, determined steps. He wasn't there as a billionaire or businessman. He was there as a man with something to prove, to himself and to the two people who had, unexpectedly, become his turning point. The moment had arrived to face the greatest challenge yet. Amelia's life was hanging by a thread. The doctors were waiting for him in the conference room, their expressions tense. "Mr. Montclair, we've secured authorization. The emergency transplant is possible. We found a compatible donor, but there are complications." Oliver didn't hesitate for a second. "Do whatever it takes. Money, logistics, security. I'll handle it. Just save her." For the first time, his voice trembled, not from fear, but from emotion. Meanwhile, Emily waited in the hallway, clutching an old stuffed bear. Her eyes searched Oliver's face, looking for something stronger than promises. He knelt down to her level, his eyes stripped of the usual coldness. "She's going to make it," he said, with absolute certainty. Emily simply nodded, trusting him completely, as if that moment sealed something far bigger than words. The following hours were the longest of Oliver's life. Every minute of the surgery felt like a test of his patience and what little faith he had left. The medical team worked with precision while he paced the hallways, his phone turned off, the world outside forgotten. For the first time, the numbers, the contracts, the money meant nothing. Meanwhile, news about Richard Belmont exploded across the media. Official investigations, frozen bank accounts, protests outside his companies. The empire of the man who played with people's lives was collapsing in public view. Oliver could have celebrated, but at that moment only one victory mattered: seeing Amelia alive. Hours later, the surgeon finally emerged into the hallway, exhausted but wearing a faint smile. "She's going to be okay," he announced. Emily ran to hug the doctor, tears finally streaming down her face. Oliver stood still, feeling his chest tighten in a way he hadn't known before. It was relief, and something much deeper, something he never thought he needed: peace. Moments later, entering the room, he saw Amelia, still fragile but breathing, her chest rising and falling with the help of the machines. She looked at him with teary eyes, managing a weak smile. "Why did you do this?" she whispered, her voice frail but filled with curiosity and disbelief. Oliver hesitated, but for the first time, he answered with honesty. "Because I know what it feels like, to have no one." Emily approached, holding her mother's hand. Oliver stood there, watching. There was no contract, no demand, no cold promise, just a simple gesture. A man who, after years, let his armor fall. In that hospital room, the billionaire discovered something money couldn't buy: belonging. And at that moment, in the quiet hum of machines and hope, Oliver Montclair understood. True power wasn't in bank accounts or skyscrapers. It was right there, in that fragile, imperfect but unbreakable human connection. The newspapers couldn't talk about anything else. Headlines plastered Richard Belmont's downfall and Oliver Montclair's unexpected role, not as the ruthless billionaire, but as the man who exposed a corruption scheme and at the same time saved the life of an ordinary woman. Social media exploded with comments, theories, and speculation. To the public, it was the coldest man in the city finally revealing a human side. The shares of Oliver's companies skyrocketed. Investors praised his integrity and courage. But to him, none of that seemed to matter compared to what truly counted. That morning, he returned to the hospital. No bodyguards, no cameras, no spectacle. Just him, and the emptiness that was finally beginning to be filled. Amelia was still recovering, but the worst had passed. Emily, clutching her stuffed bear, ran to him as soon as she saw him. She hugged him without asking, without permission, without formality, and surprisingly, he didn't pull away. He let himself be enveloped by that simple, sincere gesture, something so rare in his carefully guarded life. But not everything was peaceful. Behind the scenes, Oliver knew he had made dangerous enemies. Richard, though publicly disgraced, still had allies lurking in the shadows. There were veiled threats, legal traps being set, attacks on his reputation being prepared. Protecting Amelia and Emily now was no longer just a noble gesture. It was a real necessity. Inside him, something was shifting. For years, he built walls to keep himself untouchable. Now those walls had cracks, and he had to decide whether to rebuild them or finally learn to live beyond them. The choice haunted him. Meanwhile, Amelia, though still weak, began to understand the weight of Oliver's presence in their lives. Gratitude mixed with fear. She knew being close to a man like him meant living in the eye of a storm. But she also knew maybe that storm had saved her life. The hospital was no longer just a place of pain. Now it was the backdrop for a quiet rebirth. Oliver visited Amelia daily, even if in silence, even if uncomfortable with what he felt. Emily followed him everywhere, determined not to let him escape what had begun between them. But the world doesn't forgive weakness, and Oliver knew this peace was temporary. Outside, the gears of power kept turning. The next move was being prepared. And this time, it wasn't just a corporate game. It was personal, deeply personal. Destiny had already been altered. But the consequences, they were only beginning. That night, in the silence of his penthouse, Oliver stared at the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Below, the lights looked like artificial constellations, orderly, cold, just as he always liked them. But tonight, everything seemed different. The order, the control, the isolation now felt empty. For the first time, he questioned if the world he had built made any sense at all. Memories returned like waves. The lonely childhood, the elite boarding schools, the endless meetings where he learned that feelings were weaknesses and vulnerability meant defeat. He had spent decades believing that, and in the end, what did he have? An empire and a hollow chest, until Emily crossed his path with that impossible request. Oliver picked up the crumpled envelope Emily had left in his office. The cheap paper, the worn folds, so different from the billion-dollar contracts that usually covered his desk. And yet this carried far more weight than all the signed documents in his life. It was a symbol, a reminder that sometimes what truly matters can't be bought. He remembered Amelia's gaze, still weak in that hospital bed, but full of dignity and quiet strength. He remembered Emily's restrained tears, her courage as she faced him, not with interest, but with raw, desperate hope. And deep down, it affected him in ways he hated, but couldn't deny. Oliver asked himself, why had he fought so hard to be untouchable, to be feared, respected, but alone? Victories without anyone to share them, power without emotional roots. Now it all felt like a trap he had built for himself. And maybe it was time to tear those walls down. Emily called him Sir, but in her eyes was something else. Admiration, trust, hope. Something he hadn't seen reflected in anyone's eyes for years. She didn't see him as a billionaire. She saw him as possibility, as someone who could be more than a name on magazine covers or news headlines. Amelia, even sick, never treated him like a rich man to be feared or exploited. She didn't want his money, only peace and security for her daughter. That honesty disarmed him, and deep down, terrified him. He was used to second intentions, games, but this was real, simple, direct, undeniable. Staring at his reflection in the window, Oliver finally admitted it. Life was offering him a rare chance. It wasn't about business, pride, or reputation. It was about redemption. And as much as he doubted it, maybe there was still time to take it. He took a deep breath. He knew nothing from here on would be easy, but for the first time, he was willing to try. The hospital room was quiet, the only sound coming from the soft beeping of the monitors. Amelia slowly opened her eyes, her movements weak but controlled. Her face was still pale, but her features showed a little more color. Emily sat by her side, holding her hand, a tired yet hopeful smile lighting her face. On the other side of the room, Oliver stood silently watching. For a moment, Amelia's pride kept her from speaking. She knew exactly who he was, what he represented. She also knew she never wanted charity, had always fought on her own. But in that room, the walls dropped. It wasn't about pride, it was about gratitude, and about something she wasn't sure she deserved, a second chance. "You didn't have to do all this," Amelia whispered, her voice weak but steady. Emily sat between them, her eyes moving from one to the other, waiting for the moment to unfold. Oliver took a step closer, his eyes carrying something rare, vulnerability. "I didn't do it out of charity," he replied plainly. "I did it because for the first time, something felt right." A heavy silence settled. Amelia looked away, tears welling in her eyes. Years of struggle, humiliation, distrust, and now the most untouchable man in the city stood before her, apologizing. Not with grand speeches, but with his actions, with his presence. It was hard to accept, but impossible to deny. Emily grabbed Oliver's hand, her eyes sparkling. "He took care of us, Mommy. He stayed. He didn't lie." The innocence in her words shattered the emotional walls between the two adults. There was no space for games, no space for ego, only the raw, undeniable reality of that moment. Amelia finally exhaled and hesitantly extended her hand toward Oliver. A light, almost shy touch, but filled with meaning. "Thank you for not walking away like everyone else." Her words were simple, but heavy. In that moment, she forgave him, even if he didn't fully understand what for. And in a way, he forgave himself too. Oliver gently squeezed her hand, his eyes locked on hers. No promises, no speeches, no manipulation, just a decision to stay, to try. And maybe that was enough for a beginning. Emily smiled, hugging her mother and pulling Oliver closer. The three of them stayed there, in that fragile bubble of peace, far from the chaos of the outside world. And for the first time, Oliver didn't feel the urge to run from that intimacy. He felt like he belonged. In that simple, modest hospital room, an unlikely family was beginning to form. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't planned, but it was real, and for all of them, that was enough. The following weeks brought what many would call justice. Richard Belmont was formally indicted. Fraud, corruption, sabotage of public institutions, everything came to light with the evidence Oliver had provided. His business partners abandoned him, the contracts evaporated, and the reputation he had fought so hard to build turned to ashes. The man who once mocked others' weakness was now tasting the bitter downfall himself. But for Oliver, the true reward wasn't in the headlines. It was there, beside Amelia, watching her get stronger day by day. It was in Emily, running through the hospital hallways, laughing freely, no longer carrying the weight of uncertainty on her small shoulders. It was in those quiet moments during daily visits, no second intentions, no public performance, only presence. The media speculated endlessly. "Oliver Montclair, the billionaire who fell for a struggling woman," screamed magazine covers. "Philanthropy or redemption?" asked the journalists. But for the first time, Oliver didn't care about public interpretation. He knew the truth. He knew there were no hidden motives, only choice. The hospital staff, once skeptical, now treated him with genuine respect, not because of his money, but because of what he had done. He saved lives, not with cold checks, but with real involvement. For the first time, the most untouchable man in the city was within reach of ordinary people, and he didn't run from it. Amelia, much stronger now, left the hospital under the quiet applause of the medical team. Emily skipped happily beside her, holding both their hands, and Oliver, more accustomed to corporate events than farewells like this, clapped along. The moment was simple, almost mundane, but filled with meaning. That, right there, was a victory money could never buy. Behind the scenes, Richard desperately tried to reverse the process, but the evidence was undeniable. The justice system moved forward. This time, not even bribes or influence could save him. It was the end of the cycle of arrogance and abuse of power. Meanwhile, Oliver offered Amelia more than financial security. He offered real protection. He offered presence, something she never imagined possible from someone like him. And slowly, she accepted it. With caution, with wounded pride, but with an open heart. Emily, of course, saw everything with childlike simplicity. For her, it was already decided. "He's part of our family now," she declared with absolute confidence. And Oliver, as much as he tried to hide it, already felt that way too. The city watched as Richard's empire collapsed and Oliver's transformed. But deep down, the greatest achievement wasn't found in skyscrapers or news articles. It was there, in that improbable, fragile, but real bond. Months passed. The small apartment where Amelia and Emily used to live was now empty, not out of necessity, but by choice. Oliver had arranged a new home for them, a spacious, comfortable house away from the chaos of the city, with a garden where Emily could run freely. It wasn't a palace. It was a home, and most importantly, it was theirs. Amelia hesitated at first. She didn't want to depend on anyone, least of all a billionaire. But Oliver was patient. He didn't offer unnecessary luxury or promises that felt like traps. He offered safety. He offered presence. And little by little, she realized she could accept without losing her dignity. Emily adapted quickly. The new school, the neighbors, the pink bedroom with stars on the ceiling. But what she loved most was seeing her mother smiling again, and watching Oliver come home after work, leaving his phone aside, sitting on the couch like a regular person, like family. Oliver, in turn, was also changing. The meetings continued, the businesses thrived, but something inside him had realigned. The luxurious solitude lost its shine. The financial achievements, though still important, no longer filled him completely. For the first time, he saw value in something that couldn't be measured in numbers. On weekends, Oliver took Emily to the park, taught her how to play chess, told stories from his own youth, the few good memories he kept. Amelia, by his side, observed quietly, still cautious, but more involved with each passing day. It was impossible not to give in to his quiet care, his constant presence, and, gradually, to the feelings that were growing. Oliver's social circle raised their eyebrows. "You've changed," some said. "You're getting soft," others whispered. He heard it all and ignored it, because deep down, he knew the truth. He was becoming human, and as frightening as that was, it also made him whole. Gradually, people around them noticed. The cold, untouchable man was smiling now. Not the fake smile of gala events, but a sincere, discreet, awkward, but real smile. It was the kind of change you don't announce on magazine covers, but everyone sees it in the details. Emily still called him Oliver, but the spark in her eyes said more. She saw him as the man who stayed, who fought, who saved them. And in her heart, he was far more than a billionaire. He was what she needed. The new beginning wasn't perfect. There were doubts, fears, barriers, but together they were learning, building something from scratch. And for the first time, Oliver Montclair had what he never imagined he wanted: a home. Oliver Montclair never believed in fate. To him, life was built with contracts, cold decisions, and perfectly calculated numbers. But looking back now, he understood that some things just happen. Life sometimes ignores our walls, our fears, and puts exactly what we've been avoiding in our path. People who change everything. He never planned to walk into that restaurant that night. Never imagined that a little girl with a crumpled envelope and an impossible request would destroy everything he thought he believed. But that's exactly what happened, and as much as he resisted, the impact was inevitable. She changed him without even realizing it. Emily didn't understand the full weight of what she did. She was just a desperate child trying to save her mother. But in her innocence, in her courage, she did what no one had done in decades. She cracked the armor around the coldest man in the city. And Oliver, though it took him time to admit it, was grateful. Amelia, over time, understood it too. Not all wealthy men are cruel. Not all men run away. Some stay. Some, even when broken inside, choose to try again. And together, she, Emily, and Oliver, they began something fragile, imperfect, but honest. The world kept spinning. Headlines came and went. The business deals continued. But what truly mattered happened far from the cameras. Quiet afternoons in the garden, soft laughter at breakfast, silent looks that spoke louder than words. It was in those little routines that happiness quietly bloomed. Oliver had learned that money buys comfort, security, luxury, but it doesn't fill the void of not having someone to come home to at the end of the day. He learned that power impresses but doesn't warm your soul. And most of all, that as terrifying as it is, trusting is worth it. Because deep down we all carry cracks, and only love can fill them. Life still brought its challenges, enemies, responsibilities, insecurities. But now he wasn't facing them alone. He had Amelia. He had Emily. And for the first time, he had something greater than an empire. He had purpose. And that was worth every battle. The mirror still showed the cold man, perfectly dressed, with that firm, intimidating stare. But behind his eyes, there was something new, a flicker of humanity, of vulnerability, and of hope. And Oliver knew he would never be the same again. Because sometimes, all it takes is someone who stays, who fights, who cares. And in the end, the greatest wealth doesn't fit inside bank vaults. It fits inside the heart of someone who finally learns how to love.